windows of Vance Auto Works as Patrick Vance wiped grease from his hands with a worn rag. At 38, he moved through the garage with the same precision he brought to every football play in high school. Calculated, efficient, unstoppable. The smell of motor oil and metal filled the air as he checked the day's work orders. His father had built this building in 1987, back when Main Street still had life in it. Patrick had spent countless afternoons here as a boy. Learning to read engines sounds like other kids learn to read books. When his father died of a heart attack at 52, Patrick inherited a struggling shop and a mountain of debt. That was 15 years ago. Now the business employed half the town's mechanics and service customers as far as Nashville. "You ready for some serious fishing today?" Rhett called from across the shop. Patrick's older brother stood near the tool rack, his marine straight posture unmistakable even in civilian clothes. 3 years of EMT work hadn't softened the edges his military service had sharpened. At 41, Rhett carried the same quiet intensity that had made him a natural leader in the Corps. "Give me 10 minutes, Patrick said, pulling off his work shirt. "Need to grab my gear from the house." Trevor Kincaid looked up from under the hood of a Ford pickup, his sandy hair catching the fluorescent light. "Catch some big ones for me." He grinned, that easy smile that had charmed half the town since high school. "I'll hold down the fort." At 38, Trevor still moved like the high school quarterback he'd been, all casual confidence and effortless charm. He'd never quite found his footing after graduation, a few semesters at community college, a stint in Nashville, trying to make it as a musician, 2 failed engagements before he'd settled back home and partnered with Patrick in the garage business. Patrick nodded and headed for his truck. 12 years of partnership with Trevor had built something solid. They'd started this business from nothing, 2 kids with big dreams and calloused hands. Patrick had handled the business side: permits, insurance, customer relations, financial planning. Trevor managed the day-to-day operations, employee scheduling, parts ordering. It had worked perfectly until recently, when Patrick noticed small discrepancies in the books that Trevor always had reasonable explanations for. Now Vance Auto Works employed 8 people and serviced half the county. They'd expanded twice, added a body shop division, and built a reputation for honest work at fair prices. Patrick took pride in what they'd accomplished, even as he wondered why the business never seemed to accumulate the cash reserves he expected from their level of success. The drive home took 5 minutes through quiet streets lined with oak trees that had stood since before the Civil War. Patrick's house sat on Maple Street, a 2-story colonial with white shutters that Alora had insisted on painting blue last spring. She'd said it looked more welcoming. Patrick had wondered who she was trying to welcome, but he'd paid for the paint anyway. That they'd bought the house 7 years ago when business was picking up and Alora was talking about starting a family. The family never happened. First, it was her career, then his business demands, then her career again. Now the 3-bedroom house felt too big and too quiet, filled with furniture Alora had chosen and memories that felt increasingly hollow. That he pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. The house looked peaceful in the Saturday afternoon light. Alora's car sat in its usual spot. She'd mentioned something about cleaning today, organizing closets, or some such thing. Patrick had stopped listening to her domestic plans months ago. Inside, the house felt too quiet. Patrick climbed the stairs, his boots heavy on each step. He needed his tackle box from the bedroom closet, maybe grab a change of clothes for the cabin. Red had promised they'd stay overnight if the fish were biting. The staircase creaked on the 7th step it always had, ever since they'd moved in. Alora had been after him to fix it for years, but Patrick had never gotten around to it. Now he was grateful for the sound that had warned him countless times when she was coming upstairs during their arguments. Halfway up the stairs, he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Soft moaning, rhythmic and unmistakable. Patrick's hand froze on the banister. His pulse hammered in his ears, but his mind went cold and sharp. For a split second, he wondered if he was imagining things. Maybe Alora was watching a movie or talking on the phone, or he took another step. The sound grew clearer, undeniable. God, yes. Alora's voice drifted from their bedroom, breathless and eager in a way Patrick hadn't heard in years. "You're so much better than him." Patrick stopped breathing. Not from shock, from absolute, crystalline clarity. Every muscle in his body went still as he processed what he was hearing. His football training kicked in automatically. Assess the situation, identify the threat, plan the response. Trevor's voice came next, low and rough with exertion. He has no idea what he's got. He never did, Alora gasped. But you do. God, Trevor, you do. The words hit Patrick like ice water. Not just an affair of betrayal by the two people he trusted most in the world. His wife of 12 years and his business partner since high school. Patrick moved backward downstairs, each step deliberate and silent. He'd learned to move quietly as a boy, sneaking past his drunk father's bedroom after another violent night. Some skills never left you. His mind cataloged details with mechanical precision. Trevor's silver Honda in the driveway, parked next to Alora's blue Camry. The way neither of them had mentioned Trevor stopping by. The timing midday on a Saturday when most people were running errands or working in their yards. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Years. He reached the bottom of the stairs and kept walking. Through the living room where he and Alora had watched countless movies, argued about money, made plans for a future that was apparently never real. Through the kitchen where she cooked his favorite meals while planning his destruction. He paused at the back door and looked around the house one final time. Everything appeared normal: coffee cups in the sink, mail stacked on the counter, Alora's gardening gloves folded neatly by the window. A life that had been a lie. Patrick walked out the back door, climbed into his truck, and drove away without looking back. He didn't speed or slam doors or punch the steering wheel. Rage would come later. Right now, he needed clarity that Rhett's cabin sat 15 miles outside town, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Patrick found his brother loading fishing gear into a cooler on the porch. Rhett looked up as Patrick's truck rolled to a stop in the gravel drive, then stopped what he was doing. "You forget something?" Rhett asked, then stopped. His eyes narrowed as he studied Patrick's face. Years of combat had taught him to read expressions, body language, the subtle signs that separated a man holding it together from one about to crack. What happened? Patrick climbed out of the truck and walked to the porch. He sat down on the wooden steps and stared out at the tree line. The forest stretched for miles, unbroken and peaceful. He'd always found comfort here, away from the noise and complications of town life. Rhett set down the cooler and joined him, settling his larger frame on the steps with the careful movements of someone whose body had absorbed too much punishment over the years. "It's Trevor," Patrick said. His voice came out level, almost conversational. "She's been sleeping with him." Rhett went completely still. "What?" "I went back for my tackle box. They were in our bedroom." Patrick picked up a small stone from the gravel and rolled it between his fingers. "I heard everything." "Jesus Christ." Rhett's hands clenched into fists. "I'll kill him." "No." Patrick's voice carried the same authority that had made him team captain, the same quiet command that had earned him respect in every room he'd ever entered. "You won't." "The hell I won't." "That piece of Rhett." Patrick looked at his brother. In Rhett's eyes, he saw the same cold fury that had made him an effective Marine, the same protective instinct that had gotten him in trouble more than once when someone threatened family. "You burn them slow." Understanding passed between them. Rhett had seen enough betrayal in the Marines to know the difference between rage and strategy. Quick revenge felt good, but accomplished nothing. Real justice required patience, planning, and a willingness to wait for the perfect moment to strike. That he nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Time to think. And someone who won't ask stupid questions about forgiveness." Rhett opened 2 beers from the cooler and handed one to Patrick. They sat in silence as the sun moved across the sky, each lost in their own thoughts. No fishing got done that day, but Patrick's mind worked constantly, analyzing the situation from every angle. "How long you think it's been going on?" Rhett asked as the afternoon light began to fade. "I don't know. Months, maybe longer." Patrick took a long drink of beer. Looking back, there were signs. Late nights at the shop, Trevor suddenly having money for things he couldn't afford, Alora being more interested in my schedule than usual. "You think it's just sex, or something bigger?" Patrick considered the question. Alora wasn't the type for simple affairs. She was too calculating, too focused on outcomes. And Trevor had been acting strange about the business lately, asking questions about finances and legal documents that seemed innocent at the time. Bigger, Patrick said finally. Alora doesn't do anything without a reason. Monday morning, Patrick walked into Vance Auto Works at 7:30, same as always. Trevor stood at the coffee pot, hair still damp from his shower. He looked relaxed, satisfied, like a man who'd spent a pleasant weekend. When he looked up and saw Patrick, his expression shifted to something that might have been guilt if Patrick had known better. "How was the fishing?" "Good," Patrick said. He poured coffee into his usual mug, the one Alora had given him for their anniversary 3 years ago. It said "World's Best Husband" in fading letters. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Catch anything worth keeping?" Patrick looked at Trevor over the rim of his coffee cup, studying the face he'd known since they were 8 years old. Same easy smile, same casual confidence. If Patrick hadn't heard him in his bedroom, he never would have suspected anything. "Always do." Trevor's smile faltered slightly, as if he sensed something different, but couldn't identify what. "Everything okay? You seem quiet, just thinking about business." Patrick sat down at his desk and opened the computer. "We need to go over the quarterly numbers soon." "Sure, whenever you want." Trevor turned back to his coffee, but Patrick caught him watching in the reflection of the shop windows. The week passed in a strange dance of normalcy. Patrick worked on engines, managed the books, dealt with customers. He shared beers with Trevor on Wednesday afternoon when they finished early, listening to Trevor complain about part suppliers and joke about weekend plans. But he watched everything now. Trevor had tells that Patrick had never noticed before, or maybe had chosen not to notice. When Trevor lied, he touched his nose. When he felt guilty, he talked too much. When he thought he was getting away with something, he got careless that on Tuesday, Trevor left the shop at 2 o'clock, claiming he needed to pick up parts from the supplier in Nashville. Patrick knew the supplier was closed on Tuesdays. He followed Trevor's silver Honda from a distance, watching it turn onto Maple Street and park in his driveway. Patrick took photos with his phone. Date stamps, clear images of Trevor's car at his house during work hours. Evidence. Thursday night, Patrick installed surveillance equipment in his office after everyone left. Small cameras hidden in picture frames, voice recorders taped under his desk. Technology had gotten cheap and easy over the past few years. He'd learned basic electronics during his brief stint in the Army National Guard before his discharge. Some skills transferred well to civilian life. The cameras would capture any conversations in his office. The voice recorders would pick up phone calls. If Trevor was stealing from the business and Patrick's instincts told him he was, the evidence would be recorded. Friday afternoon, Gia Rojas stopped by the shop. She worked at Hartwell Pharmacy and had been dating Trevor for 2 years now. Smart woman, maybe too smart for her own good. She had a daughter from a previous relationship, 8-year-old Emma with bright eyes and Trevor's habit of asking too many questions. Gia was 34. With dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that missed very little. She wore scrubs from her pharmacy job and sensible shoes. Not glamorous like Alora, but real, honest. The kind of woman who said what she meant and meant what she said. "Is Trevor around?" she asked Patrick. "Parts run. Should be back soon." Gia nodded and walked to Trevor's workstation. She picked up a wrench and examined it like she was studying something important, but Patrick could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing toward the office. "Can I ask you something?" Gia said without looking up. "Sure. You ever notice anything different about Trevor lately?" Patrick set down his socket wrench and wiped his hands on a shop rag. "Different how? I don't know. Secretive. Like he's got something on his mind." She put down the wrench and turned to face him. "More secretive than usual, I mean. Trevor's always been good at keeping things to himself, but this is different." Patrick walked over to where she stood. "What makes you ask?" "He's been working late a lot. Says you guys have big projects coming up, major contracts that require extra hours." She looked directly at Patrick. But when I ask him about it, he changes the subject. And Emma's been asking why Trevor doesn't come to dinner anymore. Patrick reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He'd taken the photo Tuesday afternoon when Trevor left the shop early, claiming he needed to check on a customer's car. Trevor's silver Honda parked in Patrick's driveway at 2:15 p.m. The timestamp was clear and undeniable. This was taken Tuesday, Patrick said, showing her the screen. Gia looked at the photo. Her face went pale, then hard. The transformation was remarkable from concerned girlfriend to something much colder and more calculating. He told me he was here. Said you had him working on the Miller transmission all afternoon. We don't have a Miller transmission. Haven't had one in the shop for 3 months. Gia stared at the photo for a long moment. Her jaw set in a way that reminded Patrick of his own expression when he'd first heard the voices upstairs. I want the truth, she said, Patrick told her. Everything he'd heard, everything he'd seen, everything he suspected. Gia listened without interruption, her face growing harder with each detail. How long? She asked when he finished. I don't know. I only found out last Saturday. But you think it's been going on longer? Yeah, I think it has. Gia pulled out her own phone and scrolled through text messages. 2 months ago, Trevor started getting calls at weird hours. Said it was customers with emergencies. 3 months ago, he bought new clothes, expensive ones. Said he wanted to look more professional for the business. She showed Patrick a photo on her phone, Trevor wearing a designer shirt that probably cost more than most people made in a week. I asked him where he got the money. He said you'd given him a bonus for bringing in new accounts. I didn't give him any bonus. I know that now. Gia's voice was steady, but Patrick could see the anger building behind her eyes. What are you going to do about it? I'm still figuring that out. Well, figure faster. Because if Trevor thinks he can screw over my daughter's future and get away with it, he's about to learn otherwise. The next morning, Gia met Patrick at the shop before opening time. She carried a laptop bag and a folder thick with papers. Her face showed no emotion, but Patrick recognized the look. He'd seen it in mirrors for the past week. I spent all night going through Trevor's things, she said. You need to see this. They sat in Patrick's office with the door closed. Gia opened her laptop and pulled up bank records, receipts, and email screenshots. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. She'd always been good with computers, a skill that came from managing pharmacy inventory systems and insurance databases. Trevor's been skimming money, she said. He set up a company called KNV Services 6 months ago. Look at these invoices. Patrick studied the screen. Invoices for parts they'd never ordered, services they'd never requested. Engine rebuilds for customers who'd only gotten oil changes. Labor charges for work that was never performed. All paid from the Vance Auto Works account. All going to KNV Services. The documentation was professional, detailed, almost believable if you didn't know better. Someone had put serious thought into this scheme. How much? Patrick asked. So far, I can trace $91,000 over 10 months. But there might be more. These are just the records I could access. Patrick leaned back in his chair. $91,000. Money that should have gone to employee bonuses, shop improvements, his retirement account. Money stolen by his best friend and business partner while Patrick trusted him to handle the day-to-day operations. There's more, Gia said. She opened the folder and spread out printed emails. These are from Alora's account. Trevor forwarded them to his personal email by mistake last week when he was drunk at my place. Patrick read the first email. Alora discussing bank routing numbers with someone named Zane Brewster. The second email showed wire transfer confirmations. The third made his jaw clench. Patrick's too trusting to check the books closely. We can take at least another $50,000 before he notices. Then we move on the business transfer. Business transfer? Patrick asked. Keep reading. The emails laid out the plan in detail. Alora had been forging Patrick's digital signature on financial documents using software she'd downloaded from the internet. She'd created shell companies to hide the stolen money, routing it through multiple accounts to obscure the trail. She and Trevor planned to claim Patrick was mentally unstable, force him out of the business through legal action, and take control of Vance Auto Works. The conspiracy went deeper than Patrick had imagined. They'd researched Tennessee business law, consulted with lawyers about hostile takeovers, even explored ways to have Patrick declared incompetent to manage his own affairs. She's been planning this for months, Gia said. Maybe longer. Patrick read every email twice. Each one deepened his understanding of how thoroughly he'd been betrayed. Not just an affair, a complete conspiracy to destroy his life and steal everything he'd built over 15 years of hard work. Look at this one, Gia said, pointing to an email dated 3 weeks ago. They're discussing how to plant evidence of mental instability. Patrick read the email. Alora and Trevor had considered various scenarios, staging incidents to make Patrick appear violent, creating documentation of erratic behavior, even exploring the possibility of having him involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation. I recorded Trevor Thursday night, Gia said. She pulled out her phone and opened a voice memo. He was drunk at my place, bragging about how smart he was. She pressed play. Trevor's voice filled the office, slurred but clear. Patrick thinks he's so tough, so smart. Built this whole business from nothing. Acts like he's some kind of genius. But he's just a dumb mechanic who got lucky. Alora knows how to handle him. She's got him wrapped around her finger. What do you mean? Gia's recorded voice asked. The divorce papers are already drawn up. She's gonna claim abuse, get a restraining order. Paint him as dangerous and unstable. The court will give her the house and half the business. Then I buy out her half for pennies on the dollar. What if he fights it? He won't. Patrick's too loyal to fight dirty. We'll paint him crazy, get the court on our side. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll own everything. Patrick stopped the recording. When was this? Thursday night, right after you installed the cameras. They spent 2 more hours going through evidence. Bank records showing systematic theft, forged documents with Patrick's fake signature, email chains revealing the scope of the conspiracy, recorded conversations proving premeditation. The betrayal was breathtaking in its detail and cruelty. Every aspect of Patrick's life had been studied, analyzed, and targeted for destruction. His trusting nature, his loyalty to friends, his focus on work rather than paperwork all turned into weapons against him. Why are you helping me? Patrick asked as they finished organizing the evidence. Gia looked at him steadily. Because they stole from my daughter too. Every dollar they took was money that could have gone to employee benefits, better equipment, business expansion. Money that affects Emma's future security. Her voice hardened. And because Trevor made me an accomplice without my knowledge. What do you mean? The K&B Services account is in my name. Trevor said he needed my signature for a business loan to expand our relationship. Maybe start his own shop someday. I trusted him. Her hands clenched into fists. Now I know he was setting me up to take the fall if you ever discovered the theft. Patrick nodded. Trevor had been thorough, ruthless, and smart enough to create multiple backup plans. But he'd also been stupid enough to record his confessions and careless enough to leave evidence trails. What's our next move? Gia asked. We get help from someone who knows how to fight dirty. 2 weeks later, Patrick came home to find Alora waiting in the living room. She sat on the couch with papers spread across the coffee table, wearing the blue dress she saved for important occasions: church, business meetings, court appearances. Her makeup was perfect, her blonde hair styled in the way that photographed well for social media. The scene was carefully staged. Tissues placed strategically within reach, a glass of water half empty, as if she'd been crying. Legal documents arranged to look intimidating but accessible. She'd positioned herself near the window where the afternoon light would hit her face at the most flattering angle. We need to talk, she said, her voice carrying just the right note of sadness mixed with determination. Patrick hung his jacket on the back of a chair and sat across from her, maintaining the distance she'd clearly calculated into her presentation. About what? About us. About this marriage. She gestured at the papers with a trembling hand that seemed practiced rather than natural. I've filed for divorce. Patrick looked at the documents without touching them. Legal papers, stamped and official. A petition for dissolution of marriage, requests for temporary restraining orders, financial affidavits claiming abuse and fear. The paperwork was extensive, professionally prepared, clearly the work of someone who'd spent considerable time and money on legal consultation. You're claiming I hit you, Patrick said after reading the first page. You have anger issues. Everyone knows it. Alora's voice carried practiced hurt, the tone of a woman who'd rehearsed this conversation. The way you slam doors when you're frustrated. The way you raise your voice during arguments. I can't live in fear anymore. Patrick studied his wife's face. She'd applied makeup to create the appearance of fading bruises on her jaw and neck. Professional work, probably done by someone with experience in theater or film. The photos attached to the petition showed her cowering in corners, looking terrified and beaten down. The images were compelling, dramatic, designed to evoke sympathy from judges and juries. They would have been convincing if Patrick hadn't known they were complete fabrications. "These photos are fake," Patrick said. "The court will decide that." Alora stood and smoothed her dress, the movement calculated to display the alleged bruising on her arms. "I'm staying at my sister's until the hearing. The temporary order gives me exclusive access to the house and half the business assets." She walked to the door with measured steps, each movement designed for maximum impact. Then she turned back, delivering what was clearly her prepared closing statement. "I hope you get the help you need, Patrick. Anger management, therapy, whatever it takes. But I won't be your victim anymore." After she left, Patrick sat in the empty house and read through the legal papers more carefully. The claims were detailed, specific, and completely fabricated. Incidents that had never happened, witnesses who would testify to events they'd never seen, medical records that didn't exist. Someone had invested significant time and money in building this case against him. The level of preparation was impressive and terrifying. Patrick called Franklin Stokes. The retired district attorney had been his father's friend and legal counsel for 20 years. If anyone could navigate this carefully constructed trap, it was Franklin. Franklin arrived within an hour, carrying his own briefcase and wearing the expression of a man who'd seen every possible form of legal manipulation during his 3 decades as a prosecutor. "She's moving fast," Franklin said after reviewing the papers. "Abuse allegations, financial claims, requests for emergency orders. This was planned well in advance." "I have evidence," Patrick said. "What kind of evidence?" Patrick spent an hour explaining everything he and Gia had discovered. The financial fraud, the forged documents, the recorded confessions, the fake photos. Franklin listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad in the methodical way that had made him one of the most successful prosecutors in Tennessee history. "This is comprehensive," Franklin said when Patrick finished. "But we need to be careful how we present it. If we reveal everything too early, they might claim the surveillance was illegal or destroy other evidence we haven't found yet. What do you recommend? Let them make their case first. Give them enough rope to hang themselves. Then we present our evidence all at once, when they can't backtrack or change their story." Franklin closed his legal pad and looked directly at Patrick. "Are you prepared for this to get ugly? Because once we start fighting back, there's no going back to the way things were." "There's no going back anyway," Patrick said. "They made sure of that." "Good. Because your wife made one crucial mistake." "Patrick, what's that?" "She assumed you were the same trusting man who married her 12 years ago. She's about to learn otherwise." Franklin worked through the weekend preparing their counter-strategy. Monday morning, he made a series of phone calls that would change everything. The first call went to Judge Donnell York's clerk, requesting an emergency hearing to address the evidence of fraud and perjury in Alora's petition. Judge York had a reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for courtroom manipulation. The second call went to Special Agent Morrison at the IRS. Financial fraud involving forged signatures and shell companies fell under federal jurisdiction. The evidence package Franklin sent would trigger a full criminal investigation. The third call went to Detective Rivera at the county sheriff's office. The local DA's office would want to review the evidence for potential state charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, obstruction of justice. While Franklin handled the legal preparation, Gia took action on the personal front. She filed for emergency custody of her daughter, citing Trevor's involvement in financial crimes and the unstable environment his behavior had created. The family court judge reviewed her evidence and granted temporary full custody within 48 hours. Patrick used the time to protect his business. He transferred ownership of Vance Auto Works to a trust managed by Rhett, removing it from the marital assets subject to division. The transfer was legal and clean. Franklin had structured it to withstand any challenge that BY Thursday. The trap was set. Alora's attorney had filed additional motions claiming Patrick was hiding assets and threatening witnesses. Each false claim deepened the hole she was digging for herself. She's getting desperate, Franklin told Patrick during their final preparation meeting. Desperate people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that turn a civil divorce into criminal charges. Friday afternoon, Franklin received a call from Zane Brewster's attorney. Brewster, the small-time con man helping Alora fake real estate papers, wanted to make a deal. He'd provide evidence against Alora in exchange for immunity from prosecution. What does he have? Patrick asked. Everything. Recordings of Alora asking him to forge documents. Bank records showing payments for false testimony. Evidence of witness tampering. Franklin smiled grimly. Your wife just lost her last ally. The courtroom on Monday morning buzzed with quiet tension. Patrick sat at the defendant's table next to Franklin, watching Alora enter with her new attorney, a young lawyer named Holbrook who'd taken the case on short notice after her previous counsel withdrew. Judge Donnell York took the bench at exactly 9 o'clock. 52 years old with gray hair and sharp eyes. She'd earned respect through 15 years of family court decisions marked by logic and intolerance for deception. We're here for the emergency hearing in Vance versus Vance, Judge York said. Mrs. Vance, your attorney may proceed with your opening arguments. Holbrook stood nervously. Your Honor, my client seeks protection from an abusive spouse who has demonstrated a pattern of emotional and physical violence. The evidence will show. Before we proceed, Judge York interrupted. I've received a motion from the defendant requesting permission to present evidence of fraud, perjury, and criminal conspiracy. Mr. Stokes, this is highly unusual for a divorce proceeding. Franklin rose to his feet with the calm authority of 30 years in criminal court. Your Honor, the defendant has been the victim of an elaborate conspiracy involving financial fraud, forged documents, and false accusations designed to steal his assets and destroy his reputation. We have comprehensive evidence proving these allegations are fabricated. Alora whispered urgently to her attorney. Holbrook looked confused and overwhelmed. Your Honor, Holbrook said, we're prepared to present evidence of abuse including photographs, medical records, and witness testimony. Mr. Stokes, Judge York said, what evidence do you have? Franklin walked to the evidence table and picked up a thick folder. Digital analysis proving the photographs submitted by the plaintiff have been altered. Bank records showing systematic theft of marital assets through forged signatures. Audio recordings of co-conspirators admitting to the fraudulent scheme. And testimony from witnesses who can verify the fabricated nature of every claim in this petition. The courtroom went silent. Alora's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. Your Honor, she said, standing suddenly, I don't understand what's happening. I'm the victim here. Mrs. Vance, please remain seated and allow your attorney to speak for you. Judge York turned to Patrick. Mr. Vance, do you have anything to say before we proceed? Patrick stood slowly. He looked directly at Alora, then at Judge York. Everything she's about to claim is a lie, and I can prove it. Franklin opened the evidence folder and began laying out documents on the presentation table. Bank statements showing the KNV services transfers. Digital analysis reports proving the abuse photos were fake. Email printouts detailing the conspiracy. Audio equipment for playing Trevor's recorded confessions. Your Honor, Franklin said, we request permission to present this evidence in full. Holbrook jumped to his feet. Objection. This evidence hasn't been properly disclosed. Mr. Holbrook, Judge York said coldly, your client filed emergency motions claiming immediate danger and requesting substantial financial relief. If the defendant has evidence that these claims are fraudulent, I'm going to hear it. Overruled. Franklin spent the next 2 hours methodically destroying Alora's case. He played audio recordings of Trevor bragging about the conspiracy. He showed digital analysis proving the abuse photos were created using professional makeup and staging. He presented bank records tracing every stolen dollar to accounts controlled by Alora and her co-conspirators. The final piece of evidence was Zane Brewster's testimony, delivered via video link from his attorney's office. Mrs. Vance paid me $10,000 to create false documents, Brewster said on screen. She wanted fake lease agreements to transfer ownership of her husband's business. She also asked me to testify that I'd witnessed him threatening her. which was completely untrue. Alora burst into tears. "This is all wrong. They're lying. Patrick, tell them they're lying." Patrick looked at his wife without emotion. "I haven't said a word that wasn't true." Judge called a recess. When court resumed 30 minutes later, Holbrook requested permission to withdraw from a case. "Your Honor, based on the evidence presented, I can no longer ethically represent Mrs. Vance in this matter." Motion granted. "Mrs. Vance, you have a right to new counsel, but given the nature of these revelations, I'm ordering an immediate investigation by the district attorney's office." She turned to the court clerk. "Please contact Detective Rivera and inform him that Mrs. Vance will be available for questioning regarding potential criminal charges." Alora was arrested in the courthouse corridor 20 minutes later. Detective Rivera read her rights as reporters snapped photos and courthouse staff watched in shocked silence. "Alora Vance, you're under arrest for perjury, fraud, conspiracy to defraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice." The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists as she continued protesting her innocence. "This is insane. Patrick, don't let them do this to me." Patrick watched from the courthouse steps without expression. Franklin stood beside him, organizing papers into his briefcase. "How long will she get?" Patrick asked, "with her record and the amount of money involved?" 18 months to 2 years, plus restitution." That afternoon, Trevor was arrested at his apartment. Gia was there to pick up her daughter's belongings when the police arrived. She watched through the window as Trevor was handcuffed and led to a patrol car, her 8-year-old daughter safely at her mother's house. "Mom, why is Trevor going away?" the little girl asked that evening. "Because he made some very bad choices," Gia told her. "But you're safe now, and that's what matters." Zane Brewster was arrested the following day, despite his cooperation. His attorney had negotiated a reduced sentence, but wire fraud was still a federal crime. The story hit the local newspaper by Thursday. Local business owner targeted an elaborate fraud scheme. The article detailed the conspiracy, the arrests, and the comprehensive evidence that had unraveled the plot. That Patrick's phone rang constantly for a week. Reporters, friends, customers expressing support and disbelief. He answered none of the calls. The criminal trials moved quickly through the court system. Alora's family hired an expensive attorney from Nashville, but the evidence was overwhelming. She pleaded guilty to reduced charges and received 18 months in state prison plus $40,000 in restitution. At her sentencing hearing, she stood before Judge Matthews and made a final plea for mercy. "I made terrible mistakes, Your Honor. I let jealousy and resentment cloud my judgment. I want to apologize to Patrick for the pain I've caused." Judge Matthews was unmoved. "Mrs. Vance, you didn't make mistakes. You executed a calculated plan to destroy your husband's life and steal his assets through fraud and perjury. The damage to his reputation and business could have been permanent. 18 months is lenient considering the scope of your crimes." Trevor received 2 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy. At his sentencing, he tried to blame Alora for leading him astray. "I never meant for it to go this far," he told the judge. "She convinced me Patrick didn't appreciate what he had. I was weak and stupid, but I wasn't the ringleader." "Mr. Kincaid," Judge Harrison replied, "you betrayed your business partner, your best friend, and the mother of your girlfriend's child. You forged documents, stole nearly $100,000, and participated in a conspiracy to frame an innocent man for domestic abuse. Your weakness and stupidity are not mitigating factors, they're additional evidence of your poor character." Gia won full custody of her daughter without contest. Trevor's parental rights were suspended pending completion of his prison sentence and psychological evaluation. The family court judge noted that Trevor's participation in the fraud demonstrated a fundamental disregard for the stability and welfare of the minor child. Alora's family disowned her completely after learning she had fabricated the abuse allegations. Her sister changed her phone number. Her parents refused all contact. She entered prison with no support system and no one willing to accept collect calls. Patrick sued Alora and Trevor in civil court for damages beyond the stolen money. Fraud, conspiracy, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Franklin built an airtight case seeking punitive damages. They didn't just steal money, Franklin told the civil jury. They attempted to destroy a man's reputation, his business, and his future. They weaponized the legal system itself as part of their conspiracy. This requires a significant punishment to deter others from similar schemes. The jury awarded Patrick $250,000 in damages. Between criminal restitution and civil judgments, Elora and Trevor owed him almost $300,000 they didn't have. Patrick rebuilt Vance Auto Works bigger and better. He offered Gia full partnership in the business, recognizing her intelligence and integrity. She accepted, bringing fresh ideas and meticulous attention to detail that improved their efficiency and profitability. Vance and Rojas Automotive, Gia said, looking at the new sign they'd installed, has a nice ring to it. Equal partners, Patrick confirmed. 50-50 ownership, 50-50 decisions. Rhett remained as business advisor and occasional wrench turner when he wasn't working EMT shifts. The three of them formed a tight unit built on mutual respect and shared experience of betrayal overcome. Patrick sold a house on Maple Street without setting foot inside again. Everything Elora had touched, every room where she'd planned his destruction, became someone else's problem. He bought 200 acres in the hills outside town and built a modest ranch house surrounded by silence and privacy. 3 months after the trials ended, Rhett was injured responding to a highway accident. A drunk driver clipped his ambulance, sending him to the emergency room with a concussion and broken ribs. That's where Patrick met Isla Penrose. She was 33, an ER nurse who transferred from Memphis 6 months earlier. Calm under pressure, competent with difficult patients, and completely unimpressed by Patrick's local reputation as the man who'd survived the biggest scandal in town history. "Your brother's going to be fine," she told Patrick in the hospital waiting room. "Concussion protocol requires overnight observation, but his scans look good." "Thank you." "You're Patrick Vance," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I heard about what happened. That was a hell of a thing." Patrick studied her face, looking for signs of judgment or pity. He found neither. It was, "You handled it well. A lot of men would have done something stupid and made everything worse. I had good advice and good self-control." She checked her watch. "I get off at 7 if you want to grab coffee and talk about something other than fraud and conspiracy." Patrick found himself smiling for the first time in months. "I'd like that." Elora was released from prison on a gray Tuesday morning in November. She took a Greyhound bus to Memphis with $200 in gate money and a suitcase of prison-issued clothes. Her parole officer gave her a list of approved housing and job placement services. She applied for work under her maiden name, but background checks revealed her criminal record every time. Gas stations, restaurants, retail stores all turned her away after running her information through their systems. Her parole restrictions prevented her from leaving Tennessee without permission. She couldn't contact Patrick, Gia, or any of her former conspirators. She lived in a halfway house and worked part-time cleaning office buildings for minimum wage. Meanwhile, Vance and Rojas Automotive thrived. Their reputation for honest work and fair prices brought customers from 3 counties. The new billboard on Highway 40 was visible for miles. Patrick walked through the expanded shop on a Friday afternoon, checking the day's progress. 8 employees now, modern equipment, twice the monthly revenue they'd managed before the conspiracy. Success built on solid foundations instead of stolen money. Gia looked up from her computer where she was reviewing parts orders. "The Miller account wants to add their fleet maintenance contract. That's another 12 vehicles. What do you think? We can handle it if we hire 2 more mechanics. Good steady work, reliable pay." Patrick nodded. Gia's business instincts were sharp, her integrity unquestionable. She'd proven herself a better partner in 6 months than Trevor had been in 12 years. Rhett emerged from under a Honda Civic, wiping his hands on a shop rag. His injuries had healed completely, but he'd cut back his EMT hours to spend more time at the shop. "You still planning to knock off early today?" "Isla's cooking dinner," Patrick said. "First time she's attempted my mother's pot roast recipe. Brave woman." Patrick smiled. 6 months of dating Isla had taught him the difference between manipulation and honesty, between someone who wanted to use him and someone who simply enjoyed his company. She challenged him, supported him, and never asked him to be anything other than who he was. You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gone back for your keys that day? Red asked. Patrick considered the question seriously. I'd still be living a lie. He looked around the shop at Gia, reviewing honest books, at Rhett working on legitimate repairs, at employees who trusted him to pay them fairly and treat them with respect. Then he looked out the window toward his truck, where he'd drive home to a woman who told him the truth and expected the same in return. But I'm not, he said. Not ever again. Patrick locked the shop and headed home, leaving the betrayals and the betrayers behind him forever. Some mistakes couldn't be forgiven. Some trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired. But some men, when pushed far enough, discovered they were stronger than they'd ever imagined. The road ahead stretched clear and straight, built on foundations that would never crack again.